Hello, everyone, and welcome to our ReggieCon panel discussing A Charlie Brown Christmas. I'm very excited. This is one of my favorite shows growing up. We do have a special guest, and he'll be introduced here shortly by our host. But we're thrilled for you to join us in our second year of ReggieCon here at Illinois State University. It's actually our fourth ReggieCon for this fall semester. My name is Jana Albrecht, and I'm the Associate Vice President for Enrollment Management here at Illinois State University. And we're happy to have all of you here to join in the celebration of Seasonal Depression Awareness Month through this particular conversation. We have a fantastic panel. They're gonna start here shortly. I'm gonna go through a few details, some housekeeping, so everything can run a bit smoothly for us throughout the show. But please know that this session is being recorded. It will be archived on the Regicon website. You can go and visit and look at some of those later if you want to, some of those videos. Also, if you need confirmation that you attended tonight's Regicon for the event, we will post a link here shortly or later on in the panel session where you can submit your information, and we'll get that information out to your instructors. Also a reminder that the presenters will have video and audio on. We can't hear or see any of the guests though. So we will monitor the Q&A function down at the very bottom for the options that you see. And so we encourage you to ask the questions because the presenters love to chat with you. They'll have an initial conversation about the movie, but then later on we'll get to the questions. They love to answer those. So also, please visit the Regicon website. It's illinoisstate.edu/Regicon. You can get Regicon merchandise there, and a portion of those proceeds actually go to our Red and White Fund, and it's a fund that helps benefit students that are in hardship or in financial need. So please go out and check out the merchandise on the Regicon website. Another reminder is that the Regicon website also includes recordings from previous panels, and there are some really good ones out there. So feel free to go out and check some of the others that we've already done. One other bonus for tonight, we haven't shared this widely yet, but our hope is that for this spring, we will be able to host a live Regicon event at some point. So keep checking the website for those updates as well. So I think that's it for me for updates, and I'm going to turn it over to Scott Jordan, Dr. Scott Jordan. He's our moderator for the Charlie Brown Christmas. He's a professor and the chair of psychology here at Illinois State. So Scott, take it away.
Thank you, Jana. Thank you so much. Welcome everyone to Regicon, the con that asks the question, what's your story? I'm Dr. Scott Jordan, aka Zombie Scotty, cognitive psychologist, philosopher here at Illinois State University. And before we go any further tonight, I quickly want to acknowledge those people who have made us look like we know what we are doing. Dr. Amelia Noah Elkins, Dr. Jana Albrecht, Mr. Sean Thornton, who does all the fantastic artwork you see in the flyers for Regicon, Miss Danny Schroeder, and Miss Somer Simmons. Thank you so much. We wouldn't look as good as we do if it weren't for you. So tonight we've come together to recognize Seasonal Depression Awareness Month with a discussion of the beloved holiday classic, A Charlie Brown Christmas. Joining me on the Regicon crew is the hardest working man in comics, Mr. Victor Dandridge Jr. Victor, please come on into the room, tell the audience a little something about yourself, as well as your favorite memory of A Charlie Brown Christmas.
Wow. So hello, everybody. Can everybody see me okay? My computer just did something a little strange, so I'm not sure if I froze or not.
We're good.
Okay, good. So I was a huge fan of Charlie Brown Christmas growing up. It was part of the rotation of movies that would constantly play in my household. And it really kind of represented something kind of fun and unique that, how do I say this? It made me feel like I was older than I actually was to kind of understand the point of this movie. And that was one of the things that really kind of resonated with me as the sense of maturity of what this movie represented to get this, along with things like National Lampoon's Christmas Vacation. Those are all kind of stories that have a sense of underlying maturity to them that as a child, once you understand it, it kind of elevates you a little bit, particularly in the eyes of adults. So that's one of my favorite things about this one.
I love it. I'm going to sneak my favorite memory in here. I always felt smarter when I was reading Charles M. Schulz. When I was reading Peanuts, I felt like I got it.
Right.
And this one, there's a lot of meanness perhaps that runs through most of it. And there's a resolution that is very elevating. And so that would be my favorite memory as well.
Absolutely.
Also on the Regicon crew, the one, the only Dr. Teresa Rojas. Teresa, please come on in, tell the audience a little something about who you are, as well as your favorite memory of a Charlie Brown Christmas.
Thank you. I'm very happy to be here. I'm Dr. Teresa Rojas, also known as Doc Tiro. I am a professor of English and comparative media and also Modesto Junior College's first professor of ethnic studies. I'm very happy, very proud of that. And I'm also an artist, and I mentioned that today because I will be going on sabbatical, hopefully next fall, to be working on an exhibit because I've been invited to have a solo exhibit in Yay. I'm sure there'll be some comics in addition to some paintings. And I'm also, almost forgot, can't forget this part. I am the director of, notice my voice got louder, the director of the Latinx Comic Arts Festival. We are coming back live March 25th and 26th in beautiful Modesto, California, located in California's Central Valley. Charlie Brown Christmas, part of my growing up, that yearly ritual of this is a demarcation of Christmas time, right? When the Charlie Brown specials are on, the other specials are on. But for me, I didn't realize what an impression it had made until I was working full-time. I was living in Ann Arbor, Michigan, working in a newspaper there, and we were decorating for, the office for Christmas. And I went out and I found a miniature Charlie Brown Christmas tree. And I didn't even know that that was a thing, that you could find that. And I remember looking at it and pulling it out of the box, and it had the little blanket on it, and it had the one little ornament, and I fell in love with that scraggly little thing. And I put it on my desk where everybody could see it as they were passing by. Anytime somebody walked by that thing, they'd go, "Oh, I love this tree." And then we start talking about, whatever. So it became a beautiful conversation piece. And I completely forgot about that until I was watching this for this panel. So I'm like, heart, but now it's all ruined because I had to look at it with a scholarly lens. So thanks a lot.
Oh, you're muted, Scott. We lost your sound there.
We cannot hear
Sorry
you.
about that.
There we
Sorry
go.
about that, guys. Also on the Regicon crew, my friend, colleague, and partner in crime and all things nerdy, the one, the only Dr. Eric Wesselmann. Eric, please tell the audience a little something about who you are, as well as your favorite memory of a Charlie Brown Christmas.
I'm Dr. Eric Wesselmann, social psychologist at Illinois State University. Most of my research focuses on the dynamics of social inclusion and exclusion, but I also like connecting it to all things nerdy, particularly comics and movies. The thing I like best about this show is really the music, and then honestly, I think of commercials because I videoed, we recorded this as a kid off of TV. So we had this old VHS copy, and it really is the commercials that I think of and the nostalgic connection I have to the holiday season. When I think about the special itself, I really don't have a favorite line or scene. I've always loved Charlie Brown, let me make that clear. But this is my least favorite of the Peanut specials. I know a lot of people like it, but I'm gonna speak my truth now. The reason I can't get past it as I get older is just all the peer aggression. I spent the last 15 years studying the psychology of social inclusion and exclusion. And this is the one special that when I watch it, every time all I can think of is, they are so mean to him, right? And so one gospel reading and a closing carol just can't cover it up for me. But I guess one positive that I have found with it as I've gotten older is that when I do watch it with my kids, it's provided me the opportunity to talk to them about how not to act towards their friends and how they should stand up when they see others being bullied. So.
No, I think that's fantastic, Eric. I honestly feel that's the spirit in which Charles Schulz wrote the screenplay, and using pop culture as a way to teach your kids what not to do, to watch it with them. I think that's something we should talk about more. I think you're
I just wanted to throw in there too. I'm getting the Charlie Brown vibe with this sweater, Eric.
We said this earlier.
Said
We
this
totally said this
earlier,
earlier.
I'm just like,
Ironically, it has nothing to do with Charlie Brown, but it is quite nerdy. So it is my holiday sweater. Final Fantasy. Oh, it's the background screen up, but it's Final Fantasy 2 in the US, Final Fantasy 4 in Japan.
I think if we do some deep dive studies, we'll find out that Final Fantasy was actually modeled after the Peanuts
I was
game.
just going to say there's something
we'll
there.
find it. It will be
Watch.
there. And now, ladies and gentlemen, it is my distinct pleasure to introduce tonight's very special guest, the psychologist and chaos theorist extraordinaire, the one, the only, Dr. David Pinkis. Dave, please turn on your mic and your camera. Tell us a little something about who you are, and then tell us your favorite memory of a Charlie Brown Christmas.
Hi, I'm super glad to be here and grateful. I'm Dave Pinkis. I'm at Chapman University. I'm a professor there. I'm a clinical psychologist, so I actually am licensed and I do practice 1 day a week. I think I'm getting better, but I'm keeping practicing. And yeah, for my research, I study nonlinear dynamics in applied mostly to resilience and psychotherapy process. So how we hold ourselves together and how we grow through adversity and how we sometimes fall apart, and then how therapy or life can put us back together again. Mostly what I focus on to keep it straight is just flexibility and rigidity, and how those two complementary aspects of things in nature, which we also find in our own experience, like emotion, personality, behavior patterns, interpersonal conflict, self-conflict, and so on, that flexibility and rigidity can be measured, they show up, and they seem to be relevant. And finally, the main thing I focus on is measuring fractal patterns. And that's what brought me to write the blog that you found, and that's how you got me here about the Charlie Brown Christmas special, because that tree is a classic fractal pattern, and it's what we would call a pretty rigid fractal when Charlie Brown finds it. And I won't get too deep because we're going to analyze the story, but the idea is that with a little love, it fluffs up again and it becomes more full and rich and flexible. And so I had always loved the Charlie Brown Christmas special growing up. So when I started studying personality and measuring the flexibility or rigidity in personality, I thought of the story as a metaphor, throughout the work. It really inspired that piece of my work. My favorite memory, Eric, when I heard you talk about your research focus on inclusion and exclusion, I'll reveal a little bit about my background. It's not that unique, but it's different than the mainstream of Christmas goers in the United States. I grew up Jewish, and if anyone's listening who is Jewish and didn't, Jewish enough to not be able to have a tree or to hang out with anyone on Christmas or do anything fun. The Charlie Brown Christmas special was one of the few moments where, as a young Jewish kid, I could have a little pleasure and feel a little bit of Christmas without violating any of the rules in my family. And I think I did identify with Charlie Brown. I wasn't necessarily depressed like he was or is in most episodes, especially around Christmas, but he felt really alienated and alone, and Christmas was very negative for him. And I think that resonated with me because I really just wanted it to be over every year. And we had 4 channels on the TV, so not much of it is very good around that time of year. So.
Well, thank you so much for that, David. What I want to do is you use the notion of fractals, and you said it was relevant to your research. I do want to tell the audience the name of the blog you wrote. It was Chaos Theory, Charlie Brown, and Christmas all fit nicely together. So what I want to do is ask you in a few minutes to sort of flesh that out for us. Give us some examples of what fractals might be, how they relate to personality, how you believe it's related to this story, because that'll give us some rich material to draw from as we tell you our stories.
Cool, great. So one of the coolest things about answering that question is I wrote that blog back in 2008 when I had just gotten some research results, which I didn't publish until 2019. And in that intervening, 10 plus years, a lot more work has been done, not just by me, but by others in this area. So we know a lot more than we did when I wrote the blog. So a fractal is basically, a simpler term for it is a branching pattern. So trees are probably the most prototypic example that come to mind when people think what's a branching pattern, they'd say tree. But neurons are also branching. Snowflakes are branching patterns. The edges of mountains and clouds, wave sizes are branching patterns. Our cardiovascular system is set up in branching patterns, rivers, and all the way up, if you take a map of clusters of matter in the universe and you put it next to a shot of a picture of a neuron, they look the same. So the universe is organized in fractal patterns. Technically, what a fractal pattern is anything branch-like. It's got exponentially more small branches than big ones. So anytime you've got a trunk that's relatively large and then increasingly more small parts, that's a fractal. And nature loves fractals. They're sort of the fingerprint of Mother Nature. That's why you see them everywhere. Because, there's lots of reasons why, but my favorite explanation is they're very simple to create. You can put a little bit of genetic material in a seed. It's just grow, branch, grow, branch, grow, branch. And they're highly adaptive because they'll branch as much as they have resources. And if resources diminish, you lose foliage and they become more simple. And if you're in the desert, you've got very rigid fractal patterns. And if you're in the rainforest, it's really lush. And I could go on all day, but I don't want to, we need to get somewhere. So
We need to talk some Charlie Brown here.
basically what the data I had just looked at when I wrote that blog was I was looking at personality structure, and we found a fractal pattern among our personality traits. Some we'll typically have one central trait, this goes back to Allport and so on. That's the biggest, that defines us the most. And then the other traits are arranged, there's lots of small traits and it can shift around, of course, it's more flexible than that. But basically what I found is that depression, anxiety, and other traits that are associated with like rigidity, like hostility and so on, we found those in people who had a more rigid personality structure. And the ones who had a more open and flexible personality structure, more small branches relative to big, more foliage, they were healthier and looked more resilient. And since then, we found the same result in behavior patterns, interpersonal patterns in groups, conflict in dating relationships stack up like that. And now I'm getting into emotion, looking at emotion changes. And so it shows up everywhere, which isn't a big surprise because nature loves fractals.
And one of the issues you mentioned in your blog was that with a little bit of love, a system can flourish and become more complex.
That's the idea, and it's right there. I don't want to spoil anything if anyone hasn't seen it.
Oh, no, but the spoiler alerts are over for Charlie Brown.
Yeah.
But they portrayed that perfectly. Charlie Brown was getting kicked around, like Eric said. And it was getting worse and worse, and he was miserable. And then he picked a tree, and he loved that tree. And, just to throw a little clinical psych into it, people who are prone to anxiety and depression, you've got to be sensitive. And you don't have to, but you usually have a pretty good imagination. And that's Charlie Brown. And so he's able to ruminate because he sees too much and he can forecast a lot. And then he reacts to these questions he's asking about meaning and existence and what's Christmas about. And it's making him depressed. But the underlying traits that are driving that are lovely. So he sees this tree and he picks the tree, not the, the aluminum trees that's the best metaphor. He doesn't pick a pink aluminum tree like he's instructed,
Right.
He grabs this tree that he identifies with and he brings it back and they reject the tree. And then, he's broken and then it comes back and, there's probably some connection to Christianity there. I wouldn't know, but
When she told him to get an aluminum tree, I'm like, are you off your rocker? Of all the things correct. Oh, well, we can paint it pink. That's not going to make it better, lady.
No.
No. Why? Oh, that is the least human tree, if I can say it that way, right? It's the least, it's so manufactured, it's such a copy of something that I'm like, well, Lucy, you've just revealed yourself there.
Yeah. Even the complexity of the image doesn't compare to the complexity of the little tree, right? It's just straight lines and a color there.
You gotta remember, Lucy is a bit of a hustler, so I wouldn't be surprised if the Christmas tree dealer was like her dad.
There you go.
By the way, growing up, we had many of those silver trees that were flocked. So we had like blue ones and pink ones and green ones. And I'm like, why? Can we just get a real tree one year?
Natural.
Oh man, my grandmother had a silver tree and then they had a light that would shine on it with a rotating plastic disc.
That's
that
right.
would change the color.
Change the colors, baby.
Disco tree. That is fabulous.
I gotta tell you though, I love the memory of that tree. I'm just saying.
That reminds me like putting plastic on couches, like they used to do.
Yeah.
Yep.
Absolutely.
Yep.
So here's what we're gonna do, Dave. I've asked the members of the Regicon crew to pick a line, a scene, a character, whatever, from Charlie Brown Christmas. Then take some time to tell us why they love it, and then we'll all talk about it for a little bit, and then we'll go on to the next person. So what we're going to do here is start with Victor. And this is the scene that Victor chose. So
Yes.
Victor, please, the floor is yours.
So again, one of those scenes that Eric was kind of talking about where you had these microaggressions towards Charlie Brown. You've got the kids all attempting to throw snowballs at this can. And the one person that successfully knocks this can off is who I would say is the underlying second most ridiculed person in this movie is Linus. Linus has a security blanket, and that's been a trope of his for forever. It's something that is constantly brought up, which I think, considering the idea of attacking self-soothing, comforting sort of motivations, is something that's kind of brilliant for such an older piece of work, right? Like we would see something like that now, and there would be, you could just imagine the ridicules that he would get online and social media because he has this blanket. But here, particularly in this feature, twice he uses it as not just security but an active tool. It is something that is beneficial, not just to make him feel good, but look at what I can do with this. And as you see in this one, it's a matter of winding up a slingshot of sorts and knocking this can down. And what I think this kind of foreshadows or forecast for you, me being the narratologist that I am, it's showcasing that he's going to be the hero. He's going to be the guy that saves the day across the board, because everybody else is failing at this. Just knocking the can down, everyone else is failing. Linus lines up, he has the right perspective, he has the right tools, the understanding, does the thing, and then boom. So that's one of the reasons why I love this particular scene, is because it kind of sets the tone for why he is going to be the guy that is the Superman of this story. I mean, that's kind of a cape if you think about it. And he comes in, is the hero, says the thing that he thought he wouldn't be able to memorize, by the way, and proves, yes, as much as I might seem like I'm diminished, no, I've got the greatest soul out of everybody here.
No, it's fantastic. Anybody else want to respond to that?
I agree. And I just love, okay, so as a former Blanky person, I'm going to say former, that's my story. I'm sticking to it.
All
And
good.
Tucker as well. I just, every time I see this character, I'm like, yes, yes, like, what can we do together? How can we
Right?
collaborate somehow?
Linus
But
was the most well-adjusted out of everybody.
Yes.
Exactly. The the speech that he gives, the just the intellectual capacity that he conveys is so lovely. And I feel like he's a character who takes time to be contemplative, right? And so that contemplation happens with these comfort items, with the thumb and with the blankie. And then when Linus speaks, everybody listens, right?
Mhm.
So much happening there. So I just love this.
David, what were you going to say?
Since you came out, Teresa, I also stuck my thumb all the way deep into second grade and had to crank it too, and always really, it was to see a character that represented that when I was a kid, it was helpful. It's just a hard habit to kick. I still remember that. I did label him in the blog as having an anxiety disorder, but just like you, I agree. It's the same traits that underlie anxiety, underlie depression, which is deep sensitivity. And yeah, he's brilliant. So he's a great depiction of that, and I love the idea, Victor, that that the blanket is his strength and the foreshadowing there. I never would have thought of the foreshadowing aspect.
Thank you. Thank you.
No, it's fantastic. I really like how you described that, Victor, because what's common among knocking the can down, standing up for Charlie Brown is care, self-care, other care. And the weapon I'm going to use is care, weaponized care. I guess that's how we should talk about that.
Absolutely.
Scene. But it's just fantastic. I hadn't thought it through that way either. So
well, I mean, even when you go back to when Charlie Brown picks out the tree, Linus is with him and he never discourages him from that. Like, he asked him, "Are you sure if this is what you want to do?" Right. I got you. But it's just as much as Linus saying, "I know what I need to do to make me feel better. Yes. Whatever you need to do to make you feel better, I got you."
Do you?
So you do you.
Go ahead, David. Say that again.
Carries his vulnerability around with him. It's a blanket.
Right.
So he's really temperamentally incapable of judgment. I mean, I almost want to do a study now and see if a lot of therapists suck their thumb.
Do it.
Because it does become an asset. When you know and accept your own vulnerability, you become loving, and a big part of loving is not judging. And yeah, he does serve that role.
Absolutely.
That's fantastic. Okay, we're going to go on to Teresa. This is the image that Teresa picked.
I am in love with this moment. So when I was watching this yesterday, and I tried to sort of turn off my memories of this and my nostalgia and just watch it, it was actually really depressing to watch it that way. I was like, oh, Charlie Brown, holy cow. And then I forgot about this completely. I had completely forgotten. So when we get to this moment, there's a scene shift, right? So Charlie Brown is down the dumps about Christmas, but Lucy's offered him the opportunity to direct the Christmas pageant. And this is our first window into the pageant. And it's this scene of playful, almost this bohemian moment that is very theater.
Well said.
Remember the theater kids? Those were I wanted to be a theater kid. These are the theater kids, right? Everyone's doing their own thing. They're just dancing at will, and it's completely unself-conscious. I freaking love how the kids are like, da, 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 da. They're just doing everything. And then Pigpen with the big old bass, former bass player for, I think it was just a semester. And I hated that thing, man. It is one of the most boring instruments. Going from the violin to the bass was awful. But I love that it was here because it's this very jazzy element, as we see all of the detritus that is the Pigpen surrounding him. So there's this light lightness to it and a playfulness to this moment. And then I found myself thinking, how's Charlie Brown going to do in this, man? Because
Yeah.
all of these things that we see, even the color palette here, right? You know, the lilac, the purple, this is not Charlie Brown at all. So here's an opportunity for change. Here's the potential for something greater, like come and dance with us. There's an invitation here. So that's what made this my favorite moment of the whole thing.
I absolutely love it because Victor was talking about foreshadowing, right? This foreshadows their ability to actually be with each other in their own way,
Yeah.
right? And which is, when I get to my favorite scene, it'll be what happens at the end when they all come together into a healing group. And this scene shows us they have that potential, right? They can be with each other and they can be different while they're with each other. I absolutely love it.
Can anyone else hear this picture like I do?
Oh, God,
Like,
yes.
Yeah.
Okay, I just had to make sure it was just me.
Myself from doing it. Who knows what's up here?
All their moves, too.
Yeah. I got to give a shout out to the guy at the top who invented the Running Man. Like, he didn't realize that that's what he was doing. But like watching it this week, I was like, that's the Running Man. Like, that's exactly what that is. Look at it.
It's fantastic.
Amazing. I love it.
Any more comments on this image?
If I can jump in on
Please.
this one.
Oh, yeah.
So I absolutely adore this, and I find it so very interesting because we started this off by talking about our childhood connections to this whole piece, but we almost forget that the entirety of Peanuts wasn't exactly directed at children. Like, though it stars children, these are hugely adult concepts that are throughout this entire series. And this is one of those things that I find really represents that the most, because, and this is going to sound so crazy, kids don't listen to jazz. It's a very adult, grown-up music style. Like, if a kid brings up jazz to you, you're like, what you know about that? Like, you don't give them that sort of expectation or allowance. It's not pop music. It's complicated. It's got a lot of things that you have to learn and understand with it. And this is one of those things that I always look at that says this isn't for the audience that consumes it the most. You know, we see a lot of little kids, oh, Charlie Brown. It's not for them. And that's what this really kind of showcases in a huge way as this scene. The musicality of these kids would never happen. The most theater kiddish kids that I know, and I went to an arts impact high school, didn't sit around and listen to jazz.
No.
Like, not at all. The closest would be like the music kids that were, high level, vocational studies. They might listen to jazz, but that's a little different than these kids. And I just want to point that out. Like, you picked one that really showcases how not for kids this whole series has ever been.
Teresa talked about this being an invitation. This truly is an invitation for adults, right? Now, lean into yourself, lean into what you love, lean into letting everybody else love what they love. It's fantastic. Anyone else on this image?
Yeah,
just dance.
Exactly.
Just to pick up on what Victor was saying, what I told you earlier, Scott, when I rewatched it last night, it occurred to me, I can't imagine kids could resonate, but we all did. It's definitely adults. I mean, Snoopy is having a contest. Lucy's a psychiatrist. Schroeder's playing Beethoven impeccably, and Charlie Brown is ruminating about existence. It's in the up moments with the jazz and the down moments of the misery, it's all very adult. So I'm with you on that.
Very well said.
Maybe Schultz got away with, maybe we could take it in a little better because they're disguised as children, so it was less offensive and shining a mirror on us,
No, that's go ahead, Scott.
No, you go, Victor.
Okay, well, that's a very prolific conversation that's happening right now in terms of storytelling via memes. How memes that feature very childlike figures or imagery become something that's a little bit more resonant because it seems innocent, even when it's not innocent, even when there's some huge passive aggressive undertones to it that, I actually just saw one that was talking about a meme that was like, I won't stop talking to you based on who you vote for. Why? Because I'm an adult. And it's this very childlike, very much so like this image of a person that's pointing at themselves, which in that sense, it's underlying very passive aggressive, suggesting that if you do, draw a line, then you're not an adult. There's all these different things that using childlike imagery you can get away with, that if you just outright said it to a person, you might get punched in the face. And that is part of the majesty of what Schultz did, was even if he didn't, academically understand it, he intuitively understood it and told great stories with that in mind. Brilliant.
His comics or strips were always so gentle, right? But they were so psychologically loaded. And I have to say, being able to appreciate those things when I was young just felt really cool, right? That you felt like you were in on a joke. You were in on something that maybe some other people weren't. Big deal there. We're going to go on, move to Eric's. Sorry, I didn't stop sharing that screen. Eric digs the music. So Eric, go ahead and tell us why you dig the music.
Well, it's music. It's kind of, I sort of forecasted this earlier. It's the music and then the commercials. So for me, this entire, and I guess Peanuts generally, but specifically this particular special, really is a meditation on the psychology of nostalgia, right? I mean, I just have a lot of sort of unpacking why I had such pleasant feelings of it as a child and why I have such an aversive response to it now. So really like truly psychological ambivalence. And I think when I think of this special, when I hear the music, a few of the lines, I have this sort of multi-sensory transportation, right? Like I see the basement of my parents' house.
Yes.
I see the York peppermint patty commercial that was in the middle of it, because they were all, of course, holiday themed commercials. I sort of have this then sort of spreading activation of all of the other Christmas specials that we had on this crummy VHS tape, which I think my is still in my parents' basement. I see like and maybe some of you all had these too, but I really miss the gigantic glass Christmas light bulbs. Those are really big in the early 80s.
Yeah.
And that's immediately what I think of. Like, I haven't been able to find them. I want them for my own tree. But it's not the story itself. It's all of these other feelings, the smells, the sights, the sounds. And I just find that really fascinating that I need to think more on.
Brother, I'm with you. When I watch this show, I smell popcorn that my mom just finished making on the stove. I see green pile carpeting, which was all the rage in the 70s. I see gold covered velour furniture, which was all the rage in the 70s. And I feel my family packed into this little back room where we had the TV. No, you're absolutely right. It's definitely part of it.
Dude, I got to give you mad points, because there's so many people that don't consider critiquing their own experiences like that. And I've found it more so as a writer, and I apologize for everyone. I didn't actually introduce myself very well because my computer kind of glitched. I'm a comic book writer, for those that don't know. And I have a habit of not enjoying the narratives of a lot of popular showcases of things. I can say that the experience of watching a movie with a group of people is fun, but the actual thing in itself has flaws that I just can't get beyond as a writer. And what you're talking about is so brilliant to that feat where you're like, look, story-wise, this is kind of trash and I don't like it, but I have wonderful experiences associated with it. Anybody that, from a narrative standpoint, watched Avengers Endgame and was like, this is a little weak sauce on the narrative, but spoiler alert, when Cap catches, Mjolnir, and everybody's like, oh my God, like, it's that same concept. And how crazy is that, right? Like, you're talking one of the largest blockbuster, huge box office makers of all time versus this movie created in the 1960s with the exact same effect. Like, it creates that system that some stories are told in a certain way that even if you don't like it, there are things that you can like about the experience of having it told to you. And that's magic. Like that's the magic of telling stories. I love it.
Absolutely.
I think the music is such a bundle of nostalgia and melancholy at the same time that you could listen to the music and create a narrative in your head of what's going on. I mean, it's really like hardcore sad in the beginning.
Mhm.
I had never paid attention to it the way that I did when I watched it yesterday, and I was like, oh. And then the story, I'm like, Charlie Brown, man, oh, Lucy, I was so mad, which is why that's the opposite of me, of my personality, right? So that's part of why when we get to the theater scene, I'm like, yeah, there we go. Okay, I'm okay. I'm gonna be fine. Everything is okay, you know. But there's something about the other music, about the music at the beginning that is very sweet, even as it's very painful at the same time. So it's just beautifully done.
I gotta agree with all of you. The use of jazz was brilliant because jazz is not binary music. It's dissonant music. It's filled with complexity on purpose. It puts your brain in states you can't do yourself. You can't you can't do something simple and end up in that state. And that just creates that adult sonic space that you were talking about, Victor. I just want to tell my friends here, by the way, that our dear friend Alex Simmons is here tonight in the audience.
Hey, Alex.
And he said, so wonderful to hear in an elegant academic setting, the simple, loving message I've adored forever. So good to have you here, Alex. So what I'm going to do now is
wait. If I can live on that one for just a little bit more, because I thinking about what Eric has brought up here, not just in the outward nostalgic of the music, that scene with Schroeder and Lucy. I really feel like that also encapsulates a lot of what this whole feature is about, where it's this I don't know, combination of commercialism of Christmas, and how, you know, for all intents and purposes, like Schroeder is showing her music and she wants it boiled down to a jingle, like literally as something that you would hear on a commercial, and he's just looking at her like, you don't get it. Like, no. Everybody has their own place of Christmas, and truthfully, Lucy is the villain of this whole thing because she's the one person that does not understand what Christmas is really supposed to be about. She wants to be a Christmas queen. Lady. Come on.
No, it's true. I mean, she, you know, in the guise of trying to help Charlie Brown, because, you know, he needs social support, right? And she's like, okay, you need involvement. You direct this show that nobody actually wants to do. They just want to hang out. And I want to be the star. And we're all going to complain at you for trying to actually steer the ship. So.
Lucy is the devil. Let me just put it out there, okay? I just got to. She is the Krampus of this whole thing, okay?
All the Krampus, excellent. So what I'm gonna do here is just, I had a bunch of different ideas about what I wanted to do as my favorite part, but given everything that's been said so far, this final scene and the way it's animated, where the kids come together, they show Charlie Brown a little love, his tree fleshes out, becomes beautiful, bigger and fuller. The animation here is stunning because what happens is the kids start singing in unison. And so since I don't want to use a clip, what I'll do is, hold on, here we go. Imagine they're singing, now they're breathing, now they're singing, now they're breathing. And what you have is this incredible moment of synchrony, right? Where, for example, Teresa, you talked about the moment where they're all in a space dancing in their own dynamic way. In this moment, they're all together in a dynamic way, but it's in synchrony. And this creates a incredibly, I'm going to argue it's complex. We can go, because they're all singing in unison doesn't mean it's simple, but they're creating a healing space for Charlie Brown together with their voices. And what I love about auditory forms of being together is that it's 360 spherical. You know, my vision is about 180 or 160 degrees either way, and I have to turn to look. But if I'm in a church and I'm singing and the lights are out and there are candles and we're all singing together, I feel everybody at the same time doing the same thing. And you can only get that through an auditory experience. You can't get it visually. So the fact that they kind of pulsate together in a moment of healing for Charlie Brown, for me, is kind of like the chaos theory, if you like, dynamical systems, kind of everything coming to fruition in a healing way for Charlie Brown. And I just love it. And I think it's all built up to actually get to that point at the end of sort of unison resolution.
Can you show the image again?
Yeah, give me I'm so good at this now. There you go.
Yeah, look at you. So the reason I want you to show the image is that I have an issue. The issue is with the tree.
Come on, bring
I
it.
really, really have an issue. No, I hate that the tree is now a very commercial.
I give it your, well,
That's right. That's right.
Bullshit to me.
Uh-oh.
So if that's what inauthenticates the moment. I love the coming together. I love that they're singing and all of that. But the other thing is, where's Charlie Brown in this? Right? He's not, unless I'm missing him.
He comes later.
Well, he comes in.
Right. Yeah,
Yeah,
he comes later. So that's a separate thing. But the tree bugs me so much that they could not come together and appreciate that scrawny ass tree in its own beauty, in its own, for what it was, for its own geometry. They had to turn it into something else. They had to turn it into something that they could understand as beautiful. So that annoys me so much of that moment.
Well, I got to agree with you, and then I got to feel like I got to defend Charles Schultz a little bit here, in the sense that everything you said may actually be the case. In other words, this is the best they can do, right? They can't take Charlie Brown at 100%, but they can come together, they can sing, they can create a space of love, and this is them trying.
Can I jump in?
Please, Dave, go ahead.
Teresa, I'm totally with you that it doesn't look branch-like anymore, since that's my thing. It's a triangle. However, that I just wonder if that was a limitation of the drawing style, because it underneath the green, it's branchy, and they did love it when it was spindly. It just came right before, and then Charlie Brown does come back at the end, and he's part of the group. So there's a healing that goes on. I mean, I'll go to the Christ metaphor for what it's worth, because that, as a Jew, I'm entitled to do that. So the thing was resurrected. The thing was resurrected, and it's almost like, I feel like, I'm oversimplifying and maybe starting a conflict, but that's fine because we're academics.
That's right.
That's why we're here, man.
Wouldn't want to leave Jesus dead on the cross. It's amazing that he came back and he was gorgeous and alive again without the stigmata and the blood and the whip marks. I think that's what they did with the tree, and maybe that's the religion would be better if he had the blood and the stigmata. But
think about what you're saying though, which makes this so much deeper than any of us have ever talked or touched on. Because okay, so Christmas being a very commercialized holiday, the reference of Jesus as representing the tree, notice the concept, the merit of the tree selection to begin with has been overshadowed almost in a cultish like move where everybody is now singing about it. And the way that it all plays, Charlie Brown never wins. So even as he's trying to find the true meaning of Christmas, the tree that he picked gets decorated with award-winning, dress up to make it something that everybody now feels is beautiful.
And that's
when
not
he comes
what he
back,
picked.
right?
That's not what he picked.
Right. So when he comes back and joins them, he has lost his fight in trying to understand the meaning of Christmas. It still comes back to this very deep, again, condemnation of the commercialism of things. And if I'm not mistaken, who's the first person that leads everybody to take stuff off of Snoopy's house to decorate that tree? It's Lucy.
Oh, wow.
Like when I say she's the villain of this thing, she is the villain. She is actively trying to make sure that everyone thinks that something beautiful is what it means to have Christmas.
Victor, let me drop it one floor down on that.
Let's go.
This is all the way back to my undergrad years, but I took a course on ancient mystery cults. And if what I learned there is true, someone should validate for me where the Christmas tree actually came from. What I learned in that course is it came from the mystery of Eleusis in Greece, where they did a long pilgrimage up to a temple. It was a mystery cult because it was sort of outlawed. It wasn't mainstream. And here's the tricky part. Part of the ritual is that some folks who wanted to go be eunuchs in the temple would lop off their genitalia and present it in their hands. I don't know if it was the whole package or just the testes or what, because they didn't bleed out. I always wondered about that. They'd present it at the temple. They'd let them in, stitch them up, and then they would live there, as eunuchs for the rest of the time. And they would bury the testes. And the idea is that an evergreen tree would grow and they would decorate it.
Wow.
And that was a way of honoring Attis, who I forget what he was a god of. And then there may have been other rituals that used evergreens as well, but that's what I learned, at least back in school. And so, I think the early Christians grabbed that from that pagan tradition and others, and that's why they decorated the trees.
Literal balls in a tree.
So commercially, roots,
Shiny ones with
put
the
roots all the way to Kmart shopping and whatnot.
I so want to make some phallic comment here, but I love the the comment that Alex put in the chat. If I can read that, because I want to kind of bring that to life, because I really love what he posted here. So Alexander Simmons says, I feel that if any Christmas holiday production should be repeated, it's this one. Because unfortunately, Lucy's attitude about commercializing Christmas has come to fruition. Each year, decorations go up earlier and earlier. We're not even out of Halloween before Thanksgiving decorations go up. And if I may add, sometimes we're not even in Halloween before that happens. And Christmas decorations start coming down, and in stores Christmas Eve. So I think forgetting the spirit of the holidays is still a plague. I love this word, a plague or a pandemic of sorts that we need to deal with. And this little film helps. And that gets to part of what I'm saying, is this idea of it's not good enough unless it's decorated in a very commercial way. And I'm not convinced that little tree ever lived as this big full tree. I think that's as far as it got. Right. And maybe it was a little fuller and it dropped some of the needles, right? Maybe it lost some of its fractal nature. We can say that. But they turned it into a monstrosity as far as I'm concerned. And even as I recognize that, I'm very much into that moment of community, if I can say that. I still buy the moment of community, but I'm pissed about that tree.
It's a compromise.
If we buy Victor's argument that Lucy's the villain, and we buy the argument that she's the first one that made the tree that way, then that's consistent with the idea that Schultz was telling us that's the best these kids are able to do right now, right? In other words, they're not able to experience Charlie Brown's fullness yet. They can come together and sing, but they're not quite there. So if Lucy's the villain, then that was done to complement those ideas.
Right.
Shout out to Alex for that chat comment. That was awesome.
Yeah. On the idea of Lucy being the villain, can I point out that she's also the psychiatrist?
Right. I mean,
the word commemorate, and that my favorite moment of the thing now was that jingle dance she did with that nickel.
Oh, I love the sound of it hitting the can.
You got it.
Come on.
I mean, that's her big solo number.
Right.
angle of it. So we're here for seasonal affective disorder.
Yeah.
And in some ways, the holidays are a hedge against depression and loneliness in the dark. I don't know. I mean, Teresa, you're starting to convince me about the nastiness of that Fuller tree. I am being swayed. And I wonder if the earlier Christmas and the buildup and the commercialization is sort of like, you know, like antidepressants that lose their effectiveness every 10 years or so. And then you got to come up with a new one, like almost we're chasing the avoidance of the reality of the seasons and the darkness and the isolation. And if there isn't a deeper message that you're getting at, Teresa, about acceptance, I'm picturing your vision of that tree would just be that they would love it as it is. I mean, you said that.
With the blanket, I have to say the blanket adds something to it. I just love the blanket, and with the one ornament, that's all it can handle. That's all it can handle. And so we love this tree the way it is, because the other way is kind of a glamour, right? It's a mask. It's not real.
And if you had purchased a little toy of that guy, no one would know what it was.
No one would know what that was.
No one would know what that was.
Exactly.
Everybody has bought into this new vision of the tree.
Right.
And so the old vision of the tree is gone. And I'm like, no.
That's
was
up there.
not Charlie Brown's. That's not what he chose. That's not what he accepted. That's not what he wanted.
Absolutely.
But
do we want to bring in the Franklin controversy or not? This is
what controversy?
You all do diversity here, right? The Franklin controversy, that it's been in the news lately.
Yeah.
I wonder if that tree is a little bit the same kind of thing. So Franklin, you know, Schultz was heroic in some ways, bringing Franklin in, you know, the black peanut, and he did it early, 67. And, you know, but then in the Thanksgiving special, I guess he was sitting alone at the table. That's where I saw it. It was over Thanksgiving. We were talking about that. I wonder if the tree also, like, Schultz is dead, isn't he? We can't ask him, but but I wonder if making the tree look so nice like that was kind of like, hey, Franklin's at Thanksgiving, but he's alone on that side of the table. I've got a deep message here about commercialization, but it's 1965. I've got to
tell you like that.
Like you said, Scott, about they're doing the best they can. Maybe the audience, he realized the limits of the audience, and they weren't going to get jazzed up about a spindly little tree that they love.
Coca-Cola paid them to make this. So Coca-Cola reached out to them, asked if they could create a Charlie Brown Christmas special. Charlie Brown had never been animated before. It had simply been drawn in strip. They had 6 months. I'm stunned at what they're able to put together.
Absolutely.
In 6 months. And this is getting in under the radar of commercialism within commercialism.
Right.
I totally.
What a strike against the man.
I tell you what, now when we buy that tree that looks like that, we're all going to know what that tree means.
Exactly.
Resist.
Well, I mean, it's like
Coca-Cola tree.
if you really look at the Jesus analogy there, though, it's really kind of interesting if you start to say, okay, this is at the end of this story. So the end of the Jesus story in Christianity is Easter, right? Like that's the end. And one of the big pieces of that is the Holy Grail, the cup that he drank out of. If you guys go back to, this is okay, I'm geeking out here.
We're with you.
If you go back to Indiana Jones in the Last Crusade, right? The bad guy thinks that the more opulent looking cup is the one that is worthy of being the cup that Jesus had, right? But Indy figures out his dad was a carpenter. The trashy, worst looking possible cup that's around anything else, that was Jesus's cup. The tree is literally that statement where to find joy in it. Charlie Brown grabs it at its most bare sense. And then here comes Lucy that says, no, we got to dress this thing up to make it worth everybody else's adoration, idolization. Yo, this is deep. Why have we not talked about this before?
Victor?
Before this scene, there's actually, they all make fun of Charlie Brown's tree. He picks it up. He walks away with it and says, I'm taking you home because you're beautiful.
I love
and
you.
then he stops by stops by Snoopy's thing, grabs one little bulb, and then he falls and it says, oh, I've killed it. Everything I do gets ruined. So even in these moments of joy, personal joy. There's still this self-destructive kind of
And
psychic
in that
vibe.
moment too, the tree is bent over,
Yes.
and then Charlie Brown is bent over, and they're parallel in
Yeah.
their
Because
parallel.
he's already starting to compromise. He's already
Yeah.
looking at it and going, I needed to put this ball on it to make it
Yeah.
look pretty. And
Yeah.
look at what I did. I ruined it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That even goes along with everything else we've said here about,
Eric, what were you going to say?
Oh, I was just going to make a joke that I was going to say, Victor, you have chosen wisely.
Thank you.
But I guess in all seriousness, we've been talking a lot about this last scene, and I feel like the feels that I have are still a mixture of ambivalence, right? So the singing, as Scott pointed out earlier, this sort of synchronous activity. I mean, there are studies that find that, when people sing together or dance together or do these sort of coordinated activities, that they do feel more socially bonded, right? And so we do, I think, as an audience, get that vicarious feeling of connection. But the sort of the negative aspect of the ambivalence is that they never apologize to Charlie Brown.
Right.
Right.
Linus says, it isn't such a bad tree, it just needs a little love. And then Lucy says, of course, the most non-apology ever, he is a blockhead, but he did get a nice tree, right?
Exactly.
Now,
the final
of course,
insult.
we don't know what happens after the camera turns off, if we were to assume these were real folks, right? Maybe they have an actual sort of reconciliation afterwards. But all we are shown is he comes back, they tell him Merry Christmas, and they sing, but they don't apologize for all of the barbs they threw his way. So that's my negative side of that.
Right.
Yeah, I think that's also part of Schultz's style, right? When you read the strips, it's all there, and you either put together the complex jazz he's putting on the page, or you hear a pop tune and don't get it, right? And
Doesn't have time yet.
Exactly. No, absolutely. I want to say to the people out there, just quickly, people who are out there watching, if you have questions, please feel free to write them in the chat, and we'd love to discuss them. Go ahead, Teresa. I'm sorry.
But I wanted to bring us to the beginning. We haven't really talked about that yet, and that was very stark for me, how this whole thing starts, in addition to the music. But where Charlie Brown goes to the mailbox, right? And I know this feeling. You go to the mailbox, you're hoping there's something there from somebody good, right? and who doesn't love mail? I still am a person who sends mail. I love sending mail. I love getting mail. But this was a big deal, certainly in the 60s. And he there's an empty mailbox, and he says, what, nobody sent me a Christmas card today. I know nobody likes me. Why do we have to have a holiday season to emphasize it? So it's exactly the opposite of what Christmas and the holiday season is supposed to be. It's this feeling of every time I go to the mailbox and there's nothing there, that is confirmation that nobody likes me.
My lack of worth.
David, can we follow up on that in terms of seasonal depression, in terms of the themes that Teresa just mentioned?
Also,
in other words, go ahead.
Charlie Brown's straight up depressed. He is. Symptom wise. But of course, in my blog, I diagnose everybody, which is more, stretching the bounds of, good clinical practice. But Charlie Brown's supposed to be depressed, I think.
And
well,
in season,
starting it out, I'm just teeing it up.
No, in terms of like seasonal depression, it's not just another day. It's this day where everybody else is happy. In other words, your depression is triggered, or it's worse. I'm not the expert in this domain, but it has to do with the expected happiness. Because at the very beginning, he says, I know I'm supposed to be happy, but I'm just depressed.
It's a little controversial technically with seasonal affective disorder. The cause is supposed to be the lack of UV light. It's supposed to be light driven, and that's the early controversy. And I remember in grad school in the 90s, I was making this argument. It's not, how can you differentiate? It's dark, but it's also, winter in a lot of places, and you're more isolated, and there's a lot of things that go with it, loneliness, and, but then they did some experiments. I think it was this guy Rasmussen. I was looking it up the last couple of days to get refreshed, where they did experiments where they did light therapy, and they did them really well controlled. They used regular yellow light bulbs and they used UV full spectrum light bulbs, and they had two groups, and the full spectrum group responded really well and got better, like full remission, and the yellow light bulb people didn't. And you can't visually tell the difference, you know, very readily. So people, I guess, didn't know which group they were in. And so it's pretty good experimental evidence that it was the lack of UV light specifically, and that some people were susceptible to that, that was the driver. Now, of course, things cascade and the symptoms cause each other, because once your mood goes down, then you worry more, let's say, and then you don't sleep as well, and then you're tired, and then you don't feel yourself, and you socially isolate, and then day after day you go deeper and deeper into it. So it doesn't mean it's the only cause, but you could sort of jumpstart their mood with this full spectrum light and regular light treatment. You could.
I feel like you just described the pandemic, David.
I mean, right?
Yeah.
I mean, we can get
Exactly.
even deeper on
Man.
it, where, like you said before, those people that suffer this tend to be a bit more sensitive.
Yeah.
And maybe it's the notion that they are that connected to nature, and how in winter time, everything dies a little. Like there's not enough light, there's not enough warmth to keep people going. And therefore, those people that suffer from this are not diminished, they are enhanced when it comes to their connection to the greater earth. And not to get all super, you know, crunchy about it, but
Please
what
do.
else could you call that, right?
It's
Like,
not crunchy. There's good evidence for that.
yeah.
There's studies showing that brainwave patterns get higher in theta brainwaves if you show people images that are pseudo fractals that mirror the shapes of nature. And then, you know, they've also got experiments showing you put people in nature more, and they get more contemplative, and their mood is better. The pandemic, for sure. I always was telling my wife when we were stuck at home, that this is not just that our average this or our average that is going down, you know, life satisfaction or social interactions. It's the variance went away. Every day was the same.
Yes.
So I'm with you on that.
Yeah.
No, I have when in the summer, I can sit outside in my back and I can see my backyard across the street, across the field, and then a line of trees. And the fractal structure of that is something I'll just stare at, because I know it's putting my brain in a state that I can't do by sitting there thinking, right? And it's not that I sit there and meditate. I'm not that sophisticated. I just sit there and look and just let it happen, just like listening to good jazz. I love
That is
to go to a jazz.
meditation.
Yeah, well, fair enough, man.
It is, I agree.
Yeah.
Campfires do the same thing, the flickering.
There you
Yes.
go.
Theta frequency.
Yeah. See, now it makes me want to question society and say that the problem at hand, or the solution to it, is that those people that are more sensitive to this thing shouldn't be expected to operate with the same frequency level as they would at other times of the year, because that's not a biological, natural thing to do. We function on a sense of hunter-gatherer, right? So like come the harvest season, we shouldn't work as hard as we did in the spring and summer, because we don't have as much to do. So the idea of needing to operate on that 40-hour work week, deal with everything like you normally have to, that has got to be like I'm not even like, you guys know, I'm not a psychologist. I don't have a degree, but just to like look at it and just kind of say, okay, let's look at the honest story that's being told here. We can work hard in these places and spaces. We have the cosmic energy that we need in order to, you know, get ourselves to that space. Once the winter comes, that is the season for rest. That's what it's for. Like the world is doing it. That's why everything, you know, crumbles away, the leaves fall, and then comes spring, that's when it kicks back up and goes, hey, you know what? I'm up now. I'm ready. You know, animals hibernate. It's the same concept. Like, we just got to pay attention to that.
Dana just chimed in the text, and root of all evil is perhaps, but capitalism and progress does drive mental health rates. If you look urban and rural within countries, the more urban, the higher the mental health rates across the spectrum. And across nations, income disparity, a measure of progress, because it's not just inequality, it's that you've got the rich at massive scales. So that drives, and that correlates. I was just showing this in class last week. It's about a 0.6 correlation with mental health rates across nations.
Well, I think geography is very important here as well, because so I'm in California, so I'm not going to have a Charlie Brown Christmas, right? It's not going to snow the way it did when, so I've lived in Michigan and Ohio, and then before I came back to California in Boston. And Boston was the worst as far as dealing with seasonal affective disorder. I had never actually experienced that until I lived in Boston. So not only did it get dark at like 4 o'clock in the afternoon, evening, that's still afternoon for me, right? But the snow upon snow upon snow upon snow. Someone told me, look, when you park your car, mark it. I had no idea what that meant. What a market? What, like with a mark? What does that mean? And then I left for, I think it was, the month of December for the holidays. And I came back and I couldn't find my damn car because it was buried in 5 feet of snow. And I saw all these little people had markers on their car. Like there was a Hello Kitty on one. There was, a little whatever. And people honor that. They don't move them. That's how you know where your car is. And then you got to dig out and navigate. So for me, I was just like, it's darker all the time. It's freaking cold. It is, to get groceries, I have to trudge, 1.5 miles to Whole Foods and pay more for, and as a grad student, that was such a burden. It's a first world burden, I admit. Yeah. But now I live in California. And Central California. So it's very hot here in the summer. It's fairly nice weather most of the year. And so you have different issues, but I'm not dealing with the winter the way other people are dealing with the winter. So the seasons are very different now than they were before. And so the idea of, I had a vitamin D deficiency when I lived in Boston, and I was like, oh, moi, from California, is that possible? And I was here for a few months and, and it was gone, but I felt it. I felt it really deeply, and I felt the shift, and I felt the change and the mood. All of that was very apparent to me. I guess I didn't entirely buy into the very real experience of seasonal affective disorder, but it is. I had a roommate who used light therapy, and I was like, whatever. And now I get it. Now I understand that it's quite real.
Yeah. Dana's comment, capitalism is the root of all evil. One thing that capitalism unleashed is homogenization of culture, making things more and more the same. So that scene where the kids are all dancing, the one that you love, Teresa, there's no commercial in that space. Those are people moving their bodies to the same vibe, but they're not being the same. And I don't think there was ever an evil scheme to homogenize culture, but it was the way to make the most money, right? I remember being a kid watching American Bandstand, learning dance moves from kids in California. Now, on the one hand, that's cool. On the other hand, it homogenizes dance style, right? And then we get a decrease in the complexity, we decrease in the variability of how people move their bodies. No one intended it to play that way. What people wanted was to make a lot of money. And the way they made the most money was homogenizing taste, homogenizing, taste is the word, so that we could get people to buy certain things, coupling that with doing images that make them feel as if they lack. Right. And our advertising media is full of telling us what we lack. It's to the point where it's sociopathic. I cannot stand watching.
Have a Coke and a smile, Scott.
You're doing a very piss poor job of suggesting that Lucy is not the villain of this whole thing, because she literally jumps in She's the first one to make any money, right? The
Yeah.
only one to make any money. Let me say, because we
Right.
don't even see Charlie Brown buy the tree. He just comes up with it. She gets money. She suggests that other people have to work in a
Yeah.
way that will uplift her.
Yes.
She's the one. She's the one that's like, yeah, we need a director, someone who's going to make us all do the same thing.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
It should be the guy that suffers seasonal depression the worst. Yes, let's
Yeah.
get him to do it.
Yeah.
Poor Sally gets nothing and she just wants her fair share. Right? I love that line where she's like, I just want my fair
My
share.
fair share, fair share.
And
That means
that's
Sally.
from the mouth of babes. I mean, I think that's why that line was in her mouth. It's
Right.
already down to that age. I think she's the youngest character in the show.
I think that's interesting.
Yeah.
Oh, we got a question. Nicole says, does that make Peanuts sexist? I would say it's almost progressive, because to have Lucy be the villain of sorts suggests a lot of power that she has amongst everybody else. In fact, there's a lot of interesting things that happen when you consider Peppermint Patty as well, and how she gets Charlie Brown all the time with you know, hey Charlie, come kick the ball, come kick it. You know, I won't move it this time. I promise I won't move it. Like the idea of suggesting that women have a dominating power that can trump the men of the story, the star of the story. I would say it's rather progressive.
Mm. And then Peppermint Patty is kind of a compliment to Lucy's character, right? So it's, we have another question. How did you discover you experienced seasonal depression? If you do, and how do you cope?
That's a good one.
So I'm going to admit that I tend not to suffer seasonal depression. I have to admit that I kind of revel in November. And it's not that I love things dying, but there are forms of literature and art that express themselves in the transition from fall to winter that I identify with. I love. It doesn't necessarily make me sad. It makes me feel tragic and hopeful. So I don't know that I experienced seasonal depression. So I don't know if I can answer. How about the rest of you?
I don't suffer it in any specific sort of way, so I can't say that either. Like you, Scott, I kind of live for the story of life. So that end of the chapter of the year is really to gear you up for the new book that you're about to start at the turn. So I'm all for that ebb and flow.
Is that why November is National Writing Month?
If it's not, it is now.
There you go.
If it's not, we're gonna use that right now. It's the end of the chapter. I love it.
There you go.
Yeah, well, when I lived in the Northeast, I definitely suffered from that. And the second year that I was in Boston, I moved. I had to move out of Cambridge, Boston area. And I got an apartment where I could have a studio. And my living room was my studio space. And that and I had a balcony too. So I could go out even in the cold. And I had a tough skin for a while. I don't anymore, but I did. I'd go out, no jacket. Whoa. And I would paint. And draw and, do art stuff and read. And I had to change the bulbs out too to have brighter light because it got dark so early. So when I moved to California, one of the things that I decided I needed was a place that had a window facing east so that I could wake up, have the sun. So I have no dark shades, none of that. And that's what wakes me up. It's a little rougher right now in the California winter. Because it's darker and we've got a little haze going on, but that made all the difference. Having that sun in the morning, it was like, what is it, the episode of Friends, morning's here, the morning. It makes a big difference in how I start my day. So that helped a lot.
No, you make a very good point there, because my home, the front faces east, the back faces west. That's why I sit out and watch the sunset at night. But I should be getting up and sitting up with a cup of coffee on my front porch and watching the sun come up as a way of waking up and meeting the day. Instead of doing what I do is make that cup of coffee and sit in front of my computer and begin the day's work, right? So yeah, you're absolutely right. Anybody else about coping? I like what you said there. Oh, go ahead. I'm sorry.
What was the question about? How can you tell if you have it, and what do you? Oh, and how do you cope?
Yeah.
Well, the main way you discover it is if your mood is tracking with the season. You're getting, I mean, technically clinically depressed. So withdrawn enough, unable to feel pleasure, or just stuck sad. And if it tracks the season, then you probably have that. And if it's severe enough, then you do need to get help from someone, not Lucy, but
Right.
a real psychiatrist or psychologist or a counselor who's got good training. And if it's really seasonal affective disorder, the light therapy does work, because technically it's going away when the days get longer on its own. So the main coping for that particular problem is to do the lights. That's really the simplest thing. It's not, there's no side effects, and it's not a pharmaceutical, and then you'll just naturally pop out and cope better, in a variety of ways. But if you're just down in the dumps, coping is unique to each individual. It always involves some form of connection with others, or as close to always as you can get. A lot of acceptance, as we've been talking about. A lot of, and love, self-love, and connecting with others in positive ways.
Oh, that reminds me of one other thing. I just remembered when Scott was speaking, and then David's comment sparked it. That's about dancing. That whole thing about dancing and just being very unself-conscious about that. So if those of you who are familiar with Linda Berry's work, 100 Demons, so she has I'll call it semi-autobiographical graphic novel, where the chapters have different titles, and one of them is called Dancing. And the story in Dancing is all about that moment where someone points out that you suck at dancing when you're little, right? Because so you have that very unself-conscious way of being, and you just kind of do whatever, and you're just moving, and you're feeling your body, and you're feeling your music. And then someone's like, wow, you really suck at that. And that is the end. Yeah. That is the end. The same thing happens with our art. Somebody tells you, I don't know what that is, you suck at art, and so you stop doing it. And I think that is very important, because in that scene that I chose, these are all human beings who are in that moment of where they have not been judged yet. There's that freedom that they are experiencing, which makes it so much lighter. And Charlie Brown has already judged himself. He has judged himself and who he is, and that nobody likes him from the very beginning. So there was part of me that wanted, even though I knew what was going to happen, I'd seen this already, but I wanted him to join the dancing, right? I wanted him to just like dip his toe, just do a little tap. Nothing. So I was like, dang it, that is a missed moment right there. I mean, I know it's not part of the story, but I was
or
so
is it?
to do that.
I mean, because again, who's the person that judges the most in the whole story? It's Lucy.
Oh, she generates nothing but avoidance responses in Charlie Brown.
Right? For everybody, even for Schroeder, when he's playing, play Jingle Bells, and he starts playing it. She says, no, not like that.
Not that Jingle Bells.
Well, he does it again.
They do have these clouds of people that just sort of follow her around and kind of do what she do. And I'm Schultz did all that on purpose, right?
Yeah, sure.
Exactly. We got another question here. What are your thoughts on both Snoopy and Sally being very happy about Christmas and not acknowledging Charlie Brown's depression?
Snoopy's the worst pet ever, by the way. It's even officially the pet. He's so not comforting. He's just like, I'm doing my thing, I'm decorating my home, like whatever, Charlie Brown.
A lot of I like them a narcissistic personality disorder.
Yeah.
I mean, Snoopy pretends to be the Red Baron, who is a Nazi German firefighter or firefighter. So
a little bit problematic. Yeah.
I mean, like, it's one of those things where you're like, wait, as a child, you never thought of that. But then you get older, you go, oh.
Snoopy's a straight up fascist. I did not.
Right. Like, that's what it is. But he's not a fascist because he's all about communism. So Look at
Yeah.
that, like, or capitalism, not communism, but capitalism, because he aims to win the contest in this one and does, like, very interesting. Snoopy
Yeah.
is,
Narcissism.
yeah, he's a lot of,
fascist and a narcissist, and out for yourself.
put it together, and yeah.
This story could be a bit autobiographical for Schultz, in the sense that no matter what I did, nobody understood me. I brought them this beautiful tree, and even though they may have sung for me, they still didn't get it. So this could be him commenting on all the people he grew up around. Eric, I interrupted you. Go ahead.
Oh, I experienced that question in two different components, because I don't think them being happy about the holiday season is fine, right? But I think the second part of the question cuts to the heart of the fact that we need social support, right? I mean, you know, we as humans need others for various reasons, but a big reason is that we need people to celebrate with, and more importantly, we need people to sit with us when things suck, right? And allow us that space to be vulnerable and validate our experiences of that, right? And I think in general, at least in this culture in the United States, we don't do a very good job of that. We when we experience other people having rough times, we of course vicariously resonate with that, want them to feel better. We want to fix it when sometimes, we'll say 8 times out of 10, right? There's nothing that can be done. So the most important thing that in compassionate, empathic, person-centered communication is to just sit there, acknowledge their feelings, and tell them that you care about them, and just listen, right? Don't try to fix, don't try to make people feel better. Acknowledge and validate their experiences. And I think that is the key there, is that everyone wants to gloss over his feelings, right? So
Right.
And
will
if
give-
you have a dog, the dog provides comfort, unless the dog is an asshole. I'm just saying.
Snoopy. I mean, because Sally, I'll give her a modicum of benefit of the doubt, because she's definitely younger. Like, she's not old enough to necessarily understand how Charlie Brown is feeling. But in this one, we definitely see that she is old enough to be selfish, where she wants to give her Christmas list. She's not old enough to write her own list, but she can dictate to Charlie, this is what I want you to say, and be as exacting about why I deserve to get this.
I think she's much more just conformist and conventional, so has an easier time. And you need that as the juxtaposition. And what better place to put her as Charlie Brown's sister,
little sister at that.
Yeah, and compare himself to. And I'm sure a lot of people can relate with a younger sibling who has an easier time.
Oh my goodness.
Later.
Well,
my older sisters can relate with that for sure.
Well, it's 8:30, and unfortunately, it's time to bring this fantastic conversation
Where
to
did the
an
time
end.
go? Who did
I
this?
tell you what. Oh, wrong share. Hold on here. I gotta hold on. Let me stop that, because I have to show you what we're doing next time we get together. Okay, so I thought I was good at this.
Don't Charlie Brown yourself now. Stop that.
There you go. Next month, please join us as we have a Black Panther and Blackjack team up with special guest Mr. Alex Simmons, who was here earlier, who edited a book on Black Panther and is known for the graphic novel Blackjack. Also, just type in Regicon to the Google machine, all one word, and you'll go directly to the Regicon page, and you'll see everything that's upcoming. And Sean just finished this fantastic poster for the season 2 Regicon episodes. We have Jessica Jones coming up. We have Amulet coming up, and we have My Neighbor Totoro coming up. Let me stop sharing that now. And
Miyazaki's coming out of retirement to do
Yes.
oh, I saw that.
I want to say that he quoted our Regicon presentation last year as part of the reason why. And if he didn't, he did in my heart. So yeah.
Mine too.
He knows there's still work to do. So thanks to all of you for attending. Thanks to everyone behind the scenes for making us look good. Have a good evening. Good night.